Alice and I'm the SPARKS lead and editor. So I kind of like organise everyone to bring the bulletin together. So this is my favourite place in Leicester. It's the Phoenix Cinema. So it's my favourite place because they show lots of different kinds of films, from like small, like indie kind of budget films to like the big Hollywood blockbuster kind of films. And they have really good value for students, so you can get tickets here for only like £5 if you're a student, so it's just great value.
I'm on the SPARKS magazine this year. My favourite place to study is 70 on Welford Road. It's quite quiet and delicious tea, which will be there now, otherwise we're in Kettering and lockdown. My tip for first year is that consistency is key. Even if it's half an hour a night, it'll build key habits for exam time.
Hi guys, I'm Fatima and I'm a fourth year medical student. I am part of the SPARKS magazine committee and I'm the lead for the Leicester Research column. I'll be talking to students about their research and all the exciting things that they learned along the way. To all the freshers, this is my favourite place in Leicester. It's called Castle Gardens and I love it so much because there's so much to explore, there's castle remains, and if you're into photography, this is the place to come.
Hi, my name is Vanessa and I'm one of the committee members this year for the SPARKS magazine. My column that I'm leading is the Medic Tips column, where we teach you tips and tricks about getting into research and things that students have been doing and things that you can get involved in throughout the medical school and the university hospitals. So I'm currently in one of my favourite places in Leicester, one of my favourite streets. It's called Allendale Road, and I'm going to just take you around and show you what there is. Cute little local coffee shops such as Brown's Cafe, and so this is a really nice place if you want to grab a brunch or something. It's called Q Coffee, and just over here there's also the In-Haze, I think it's called. In-House. In-Haze? What am I saying? And there's such a cute little garden place here called Outer Space, which is really nice to come and have a look at what's on. This is Baker Street Bakery if you want to have a little bite of something sweet to eat, and I definitely recommend it.
I'm on the SPARKS magazine this year. My favourite place in Leicester is Leicester Market because they do lots of really good foods, very cheap. You can get 4 punnets of strawberries for 50p. My advice for first year students would be to stay active and keep moving, lots of exercise, so that when you do sit down and do revision, you'll be very focused and ready to go.
Hello, my name is Rizky. I am the new marketing lead for the new SPARKS magazine, so I'll be the one sending all of the funny emails you'll be getting every month. A cool fact about me, if you didn't know, I love Studio Ghibli. Bonus points if you can tell me who this is. I look forward to your replies. I'm currently standing outside of my favourite place, which is Leicester City Centre. Excuse me, if you thought I was going to say KFC, you're absolutely right. I love food. I love food too much. But for all you freshers who are watching this video, and even year 2 students, this is my sort of top tip for you to get by in your studies, and that is, it's not enough just to be making notes and to writing down the material and to, you know, rereading and highlighting things. You need to move past whatever techniques you had in A-level, or you're, in A-level, or if you had taken a gap year, you need to move past those techniques and be able to try and recall those facts. So next time around when you're going down over a lecture, instead of just reading that lecture or looking at your notes and highlighting them, or maybe just, writing them out all over again, cover up your notes. Try and recall to yourself. Maybe it might involve writing down things or just speaking out loud what you can remember from that. And that's a process called retrieval. The more you do retrieval, the stronger that memory becomes. and the more it will stay in your brain for the long term. Hopefully you could have heard all that, and I'll be seeing you guys around.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Ethan. I'm on the SPARKS magazine this year. I'm a fourth-year medical student at the University of Leicester, and tonight I've got with me Nathan Hancock, another fourth-year medical student from the University of Leicester. How are you, Nathan?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Ethan, how are you?
Not too bad. Tonight we'll be discussing the challenges a global pandemic poses to evidence-based medicine. You and I, as well as everybody else, both know this is the best way to practice medicine, but normally this is over this period of years. During this pandemic, I've had to scale things down to months, sometimes even weeks. So I've got 4 or 5 papers to kind of illustrate some points, and we'll go through them with you tonight. Ready to begin?
I'm absolutely ready.
Great. So, where you've had a quick read through this anosmia and loss of smell paper.
Absolutely.
Great. What were your takeaway points from it?
So, I think the first thing to say is, when we're responding to something like COVID, we've got to consider why we care about something. So, why do we care about anosmia? Well, although we know from this paper that the symptom can be persistent and can go on for quite some weeks, that is debilitating to patients because, of course, actually a large part of how much you taste is through what you smell. This tends to be a transient symptom, and I think it says somewhere in the paper will clear up in about 4 weeks in a good proportion of cases. But the reason we care about this from a public health standpoint, I suppose, is because this is a symptom that patients can readily appreciate and that may spark them into going to get a test, for example. And so the research element of this is working out how reliable a symptom is this. Is this sufficiently specific to mean that you get your COVID positive patients through the door, but you don't overwhelm the testing infrastructure by having lots of people who've got loss of their sense of smell through things like the common cold coming through? I think that's going to become an increasing challenge actually going into the winter, where lots of people will get these other non-COVID upper respiratory tract viruses that can cause something like anosmia.
And just to mention for everyone listening, it's not here right now. We're recording this on the 15th of October, so we're currently approaching the winter season.
Absolutely. And reading through the paper, there's one piece of information I've jotted down really, is that actually the vast majority of people, when this paper was written, who did have anosmia also had one of the other symptoms that the NHS regard as the classical symptoms. And in case people are watching this down the line when these lists have undoubtedly changed, the big ones they care about at the moment are new continuous cough, shortness of breath, and a fever on top of anosmia. And actually what this paper summarizes is that lots of people who do develop anosmia also have one of those other 3 symptoms. But about 16% of people have anosmia as the only symptom. So I think it's definitely something that's appropriate to have people coming to seek testing for where that testing infrastructure allows. There is probably going to start to be some pressure for other things like a broad range of rashes coming to represent potential COVID infection. So I think it's definitely a watch this space. I think we could have other indications for state-sponsored COVID testing coming in the future. But actually, this is perhaps less a discussion about whether something is a reliable symptom of COVID, or more about what allows us to use that limited testing resource we have to the best of our ability.
And even from that, you mentioned things about reliable symptoms. You and I both worked through the pandemic, myself at A&E, yourself in wards around Northamptonshire.
Okay.
I've seen a number of patients come in coughing up a lung and insisting that this isn't a new cough, or they're not actually coughing. So not only do we have to base on the symptoms that we can find over the course of weeks, but also try and take people's words for it as well.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Alright, we've got a second 2 papers now to discuss. First on remdesivir and the second on dexamethasone. We'll take remdesivir first.
Absolutely. So I think thinking about our early adoption of remdesivir is actually quite emotional. It was the first thing I sort of remember from the news cycle of, oh my goodness, this is potentially a massive treatment. And I think there was quite a bit of political interest, both here and in the States. And there are, in this paper, this is a review paper, and it takes into account 2 potential trials if we go down, I think, Ethan, there's some information about them.
Yeah.
And so there's the ACTT1 trial that was published in the New England Journal of Medicine. I think is the journal with the highest impact factor in the world. It's an incredibly respected publication. And that was the sort of fulcrum around which this paper was published. And what this paper says, if I remember it well, and that's been, I suppose, confirmed in the final peer-reviewed copy of that ACTT1 paper that's only relatively recently been published, is that actually remdesivir statistically significantly improves time to symptom improvement / resolution, but doesn't have a statistically significant mortality benefit per se.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the thing with remdesivir we have to remember is that it's not a treatment for everybody who develops COVID. It's a treatment that should be reserved for only the most severely unwell people.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, those are the only group for which it has evidence. I think that's incredibly important for us as medics to understand, is that not all evidence is made equal, and you've got to be careful to not overly generalize. What I mean by that is, if something is proven to work and have an impact in in a particular group of patients, for example, the severely ill,
Mm-hmm.
we can't necessarily say that that will apply to less severely ill people, even if perhaps logic would be on our side in that regard. And I think there are some other treatments that perhaps logically seem like they would work. Hydroxychloroquine springs to mind. We know that there's some in vitro action, but oftentimes a lot of these rather promising drugs or interventions do fail to translate into an actual patient group. So going back to what you said at the start about having to condense a process that usually takes about a good few years down to a few months, is that steps like really in-depth animal testing potentially and very small trials are being done very, very quickly. And perhaps we're not fully understanding how something behaves in a living organism. So we're perhaps relying on in vitro evidence too much and then getting a little bit disappointed when it doesn't translate well into actual patient outcomes. So I think remdesivir is something that does have promise, but the important thing to take away from it, from that most recent good quality trial published in the New England Journal of Medicine, is that, as it says on here, this is not something for mild to moderate coronavirus, and it's something that actually does reduce the duration of symptoms. So I don't know how that would actually affect patients. We certainly know that people who are in intensive care with COVID can become incredibly frail and sarcopenic when ventilated. So from both a humanitarian and a resource utilization point, I think if we have something that can reduce the number of people, the number of bed days in intensive care from COVID, that would be worth something. But you've got to remember that a lot of these drugs do have some potentially quite severe adverse effects. And we're often experiencing those for the first time on these rather large patient groups, as these drugs have been given emergency use authorizations.
Mm-hmm. And just the point you mentioned earlier about things being used in the most severely sick patients. Not to get into it too much, but just to mention it here, about the fact that the mildly ill patients might not actually get any research done towards their patient group, just because we're just focusing on the most severe, the closest to death's door. So just from a humanitarian point of view, within our crash research that we're doing, are we actually looking towards the people that just have anosmia, for example? Just a point to consider.
And I think that's the thing. We've realised that I think it's become more something in the public domain, actually, that running a healthcare system is actually based on this sort of collective ethic of we need to keep the system standing and we need to conserve our most scarce resources like intensive care beds, because that does benefit the greater good. And it means that if any of those people who were in that mild more severe symptom group were to develop more severe symptoms, that there'd be that bed resource available.
Yeah. Correct. Thank you.
So we can go on to another treatment now.
Mm-hmm.
If that's again, that's dexamethasone.
Yeah.
So dexamethasone is something that really excited me when this came out. This might sound really sad, but although I wasn't able to recruit patients to the recovery trial, I went through the training required to recruit patients to the recovery trial. And the thing that I take away is actually this is a really, really good quality trial. It's been set up incredibly well. And what's fantastic about this is the sheer number of hospitals that have become involved in this. So if I remember, Northampton, where I was working, there was actually a relatively small district general hospital at one point, was number 4 in the country for recruiting patients to this trial. What's fantastic about it is it was something that everybody sort of got around, and I think Leicester was, UHL Trust might have even been the top recruiting trust to the trial. It was fantastic to see just how much everybody pulled together around this trial, and it delivered results quickly because it managed to get patients in. So it's testament to individual staff and research teams in individual hospitals actually, instead of trying to come up with their own research trials, taking a step back and go, hang on a minute, we can get higher quality results much more quickly by working together. So this is sort of this COVID teamwork at its best.
Which is brilliant to see. It's just a shame it takes a global pandemic for some research teams to do that.
Exactly. And what I think is helpful about dexamethasone is that remdesivir is an expensive drug. So the pharmaceutical company Gilead, who made it, although I don't think they sponsored the trials per se, they did give the medication out for free or at a severely reduced cost for that trial. The fact of the matter is the nature of remdesivir is that it's going to be a very expensive drug, and it's going to be very difficult to roll out into the developing world. And actually, I think it's very easy in a pandemic such as COVID to take a very more economically developed country-centric view, because that's where we live. But there are a lot of people out there who, even if remdesivir proved to be this really effective drug, for economic reasons and just for sort of from the structure of health services, that's not going to be something attainable. Dexamethasone is a universally, almost universally available drug. It's very cheap. It doesn't require any cold storage to transport. So what's exciting, I think, about this paper is this is something that can have positive ripple effects throughout the world. So the last thing I'll say about dexamethasone briefly is that it's also a medication that clinicians are familiar with. So we know that it improves mortality, not only in patients on invasive ventilation, although this is the group that gets the most benefit, but also patients who are having supplementary oxygen. And these patients will be managed by usually the non-critical care clinician, often on general medical wards. And I think it's incredibly powerful for practitioners to have a drug that they're quite familiar with. People prescribe corticosteroids quite frequently, and I think you'd find that you have clinical teams who are much more comfortable prescribing dexamethasone, because it's a name they know, than something much more like the new kid on the block, like remdesivir.
Yeah, of course. I think I remember the news of being portrayed as a new drug, but as you mentioned, clinicians have been using it for a long time, one they are familiar with. Right, so this evening we spoke on testing 2 different medications. We'll move to an article from the EMJ, which actually started this talk off, which is what to believe and what to change in evidence-based medicine during a pandemic. So Nathan, you've got a couple of points and opinions about this paper?
Yes, so I absolutely love the conclusion of this paper because it sums up everything that I believe surrounding COVID, really. Firstly, what it says, just to summarize it, is that when we're faced with this extreme situation that we're not familiar with, and we hear that there are things that potentially could help, it's really encouraging to actually just feel like we can do something. These are patients who have symptoms that we actually, at the start of the pandemic, didn't really know what to do about. So whenever anything came out, it's almost human nature as a clinician who wants to help people to go, well, it's worth a try. And there are lots of interventions like vitamin C that's mentioned in here that people took a sort of what harm can it do approach. Yeah. And actually this paper makes a fantastic point that although vitamin C isn't going to be particularly harmful in itself on infusion, what it can do is muddy the waters. So the authors suggest that if somebody's giving their COVID patient vitamin C, even if it's not directly harmful, there is a degree in harm in that by giving that, you aren't necessarily doing something else that could be more helpful. So what the authors here come to suggest is that actually, yes, we do need to be using novel treatments to solve a novel problem, but that should be within the context of a good quality randomized controlled trial. If you look at recovery and what they've done with that trial, what's fantastic about it is they haven't just chosen a list of interventions at the very start of the trial and gone, right, we're running with that. They've been opening and closing the different arms of the trial throughout the pandemics. There's been the arm on dexamethasone, I think, was closed a bit early because the results had come out and had actually been very promising. A convalescent plasma arm was added later on in the trial. But the thing is, having a big multi-center trial like recovery allows us to actually safely trial these new treatments. So just to think through this a little bit, if you've got 10 units that are doing that are giving this new treatment X, this novel treatment, if that was to prove harmful, it would take those units a good few cases and potentially a few unavoidable episodes of patient harm before they'd necessarily be able to make the link between intervention X and an adverse outcome. Meanwhile, if something's being done on the national scale of a trial like recovery, the alarm bells can be raised a lot earlier, and that actually means that we can do, although trialing new treatments is never completely without risk, it's our way of mitigating risk, and I think it really plays into this first do no harm idea of how we should all practice medicine.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Nathan. Alright, so we've had a discussion on a couple of articles now. Now moving away from treatments, we're going to move back to testing again. The diagnosis accuracy of serological tests. Again, like all the articles, you've had another read through this, and we've come up with a couple of points to talk about.
Absolutely. So if we pop down, there's a nice infographic that sort of explains it slightly better. There we go, just sort of in a visually friendly way. So I'm actually not going to talk an enormous amount about the potential for false positives, false negative, predictive values and the like. I'd just like to talk about the potential issue here, and that all comes down to why we're actually considering these serological tests. So serological tests obviously are what we call antibody tests. So they're not measuring whether you have the virus or not. They check whether your body has mounted an immune response to the virus. And I suppose that's the first problem with them. We don't know enormously well yet how the viral load and antibody response profiles work for COVID. Yep. So we don't know enormously well, although there's some work starting to come out, exactly how many days after you develop it would your IgG response come up, for example. And I think it'd be very risky, actually, as it's something we don't know, to start rolling out antibody testing widespread in that attempt to create an immunity passport that was postulated at the start of the pandemic. Because although somebody might have the antibodies, and that can tell us that they have been exposed to COVID, we don't actually know if they offer any future protection. And I worry that if we start telling lots and lots of people they have an antibody response, that actually that's going to lead to people stepping back from social distancing measures, the use of masks in public spaces, which, whilst they're not perfect, are things that are helpful to control the virus. And these lateral flow immunoassays that it mentions on here look a little bit like a pregnancy test, and they're the point of care tests that can deliver results in minutes as opposed to a number of hours. The problem with those, if you have a look at them, these are some of the least accurate antibody tests. So my worry is that we take something that we don't know how to interpret like an antibody test, and then use a rather imprecise measure to actually get that result. And I think we're on quite dodgy ground. Give us a year and a lot more knowledge of the immunology of COVID, and I may be saying something very different. But at the moment, I think that there's too many unknowns for this to become properly useful on the 15th of October.
Yeah, and of course we've got a couple of different information fronts about that as well. Kind of in the last week, I've seen, as you mentioned, about not offering any immunity. I've seen an article in the BBC with I think it was a gentleman got COVID a second time, and it was even more severe after he tested positive for the antibodies. but then we've seen a prominent figure in the media that's had COVID and come out to say that he's been told that he's immune. So we've got two very different sources of information coming up here, and it's difficult for the public to know what to believe.
Absolutely. I think it's difficult for clinicians to know what to believe a lot of the time, and I'm sure there are people much more qualified than me to talk about the antibody testing. That's why I've wanted to avoid going into the individual details of it. But testing is something we've had a massive problem with. The sensitivity of our nose and throat swabs is nowhere near as high as people would like to think it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so actually we're only just learning how we can use those tests most accurately.
Right. And while we're sticking in the tests, we'll move just slightly ahead to immunity and vaccines. A slight tangent from what we were speaking to before.
I don't know about you, Ethan. I think this is something that I've looked forward to. I think most people would like to feel there was a vaccine on the way, because it's something that can actually, that people hope will almost liberate from where we are at the moment. And so the first thing to say is that the vaccine trials, I think, have yielded some relatively promising results so far. But actually, it's not too dissimilar an issue to what we've seen previously. When we've had our phase 2 trials, what they've told us is that actually the immune response generated by the vaccine is good. So you get lots of activated T cells, and this paper talks about how actually T cells may have a rather large role to play in the body's response to COVID, on top of just the antibodies that we've talked about so much. So we know that the cellular response to the vaccine is good. But these phase 3 trials are so important because we need to know what that actually means in terms of people's risk. So does the COVID-19 vaccine eliminate the risk of contracting COVID, or does it in fact just minimize your risk? Or indeed, can you still contract it but not spread it? There's so many unknowns really about what that biological response would mean for epidemiology and public health, that it's vital that we actually get these phase 3 trials underway. And one thing I'd like to sort of draw attention to is there is an NHS National Vaccine Registry that people can go and sign up to, from which the research teams draw their sample population for their vaccine trials. If you were wanting to, if anyone watching this was to want to support that, you can go to the NHS COVID vaccine trial registry and sign up. But coming back to this, I think it's fantastic that there's potentially a vaccine on the way, but the vaccine is just the tip of the iceberg. Some of the vaccines, especially the Pfizer vaccine being developed in the United States, requires really, really cold conditions for its distribution. So even if we were to get these vaccines, that would be fantastic, and we find out that they either that they prevent people from contracting or significantly reduce the contraction risk or transmissibility of COVID, getting it out to often the world's poorest people, going back to the point we made about dexamethasone, is going to be an incredibly challenging thing.
And just what we mentioned, if we actually do get the vaccine, so there are a number of people in society, and we are treading on delicate ground here, that wouldn't normally vaccinate themselves or their children.
Yes.
So it'll be interesting to see within a global pandemic and the amount of scare that's going on.
Yes, absolutely.
Will they make an exception? Will the view on anti-vaccinations change? Be an interesting point.
It is an interesting point, and I think the thing is, whatever your view on the vaccine argument, and I think because I am a medical student and training in medicine, my view is very clear that vaccines are rigorously tested. And actually, from speaking to people in my own personal life, I think that's what's people's concern at the moment, is actually that this is something that's being rushed through. Is it being tested properly? Well, might sound strange, but whenever I hear that the vaccine trials, the phase 3 trials have been stopped because of an adverse event, actually that's quite heartening. Obviously, it's awful that an adverse event has happened, because it has to happen to somebody for it to stop a trial, and it has to be something probably quite unpleasant. But the fact that the vaccine manufacturers and the trialists are actually stopping their trials reflects the fact that actually we are in the middle of a global pandemic, but people are taking a safety first approach. And I think there's a lot of credit due there to anybody who's prepared to say, you know what, I know there's time pressure on this, but we've got to be thorough and we've got to be safe. So my message to anybody who's worried about vaccinating either themselves, their children or family members, is that this isn't something that's been rushed into. It's been expedited and we've done it quickly, but this sort of the safety checks and balances are there, and they won't just stop when vaccine distribution starts. once any drug is distributed, there is a lot of regulation still going on, not just from the pharmaceutical companies that make it, but regulators to make sure it's safe. To end, I'd say our data-driven world actually gives us so many opportunities to increase the speed of something like vaccine distribution whilst making it safe. Because I don't think we can offer effective patient care until we offer safe patient care.
Spot on. Very well summed up. Thank you, Nathan. Thanks for spending time with us this evening.
I hope that was useful.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
I will see you again at some point during the
Thank
words.
you very much, Ethan. Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.
Good night.
Hi guys, I'm Fatima, and welcome to the first entry for the Leicester Research column. Our first guest is a third-year student, Jakevir Shoker. He's currently the Vice President for Medrift for this year, 2020-21. He knows how to code, and he's currently working on a GP simulator, so make sure you all look out for that. So today, he's going to talk to us about Medrift projects over the past year that have won prizes and even been accepted to national conferences. So yeah, that's really exciting. Let's give him a ring. Hi Jakevir, how are you today?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. So is it okay if we have a chat with you today?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so just to start off with, tell me how you got involved in research.
So the first place I got involved in research was a society called Medrift. So that stands for Medical Research into Future Technologies. So they've got a number of projects going on there. I got involved with several of them, and that's really how it started back in my first year. So this project is all around using virtual reality for teaching simulations.
Oh, that sounds really interesting.
It really is, yeah, as you'll come to see. So the question we were asking is, can a simulated virtual ward round improve medical students' confidence, documentation skills, and empathy in the clinical environment? So in order to make these videos, we recorded them using a GoPro Omni to make our 360-degree videos. The scenarios were based off Dr. Nassif Mahmood's previous experiences, a former CTF here.
Okay.
We then rendered the videos and posted them to YouTube as 360-degree videos. So anyone could go watch them, and they're best with a Google Cardboard or any VR headset really. So then we ran some simulation days and some PowerPoint presentations in order to compare with our VR videos, and here's the results. We have the VR in blue and the PowerPoint and simulations in orange. And as you can see, for third-year responsibilities and understanding distractions, VR performed much better. But in terms of confidence, there's room for improvement here, so we felt there was more research to be done. The next step, we did all the same things, but this time, we edited the videos using Adobe Premiere Pro. This is a slightly warped screenshot, but as you can see, we can add text on. So this could be patient notes, or like information about the patient, any like observation, or like directing their attention to a key point. So then we ran another workshop. We gave pre-questionnaires, trained them in what made them watch the VR video for a discussion and empathy questions. We then did some SPAR teaching before rewatching the video and then applying this new knowledge so they could do some SPAR handovers before a post-course questionnaire. And these are the comparative results from pre and post. As you can see all across the board, there was an improvement in all sections.
Oh, that's really lovely to hear.
So, in conclusion, this is an engaging teaching method with great results all across the board. Peer collaboration is invaluable, and this is hoping to transform medical education.
That sounds so cool. So did you enjoy working on this as well?
I thoroughly enjoyed it, yeah, and I learned a lot myself.
That's really good. What's the most important thing that you learned, do you feel?
I learned a different mixture of technological skills, so I never knew how to edit videos before this, but the project trained me on it, as well as clinical skills, so I didn't know how to do SPAR before this, so a whole wide variety of things.
Okay, that's really nice. So skills that you'd never done before, getting involved in this project helped you to build on them as well.
Exactly, yeah.
So tell me about some other projects that you've been a part of as well then.
Yeah, sure. So as I mentioned, Medrift has got multiple projects going on. We'll go through another one of them, the QR code escape room.
Okay.
So this was done as a workshop at the National Medical Research Conference in 2019 at Leicester. And as you can see, it was all centered around case-based escape rooms. So we've got 5 people here. These are the 5 participants, members of the conference, all had 5 different roles. We've then got a simulated patient and relative as two actors, and the team of 5 here are racing against the clock to try to save this patient. Over here we've got our special app, which was specially designed for the conference. This allows you to scan QR codes all around the room and input in data to all progress through, get more information, and hopefully save the patient before time runs out.
So can you tell us a bit about what kind of results you got?
So this is our abstract, which we submitted to a conference, and we got accepted for the ASME National Conference. But I'll just take us through to the results now.
Okay.
So as you can see in the results, about 120 students participated. Most of them shared feedback, and we got them to rate things from a scale of 1 to 10. And as you can see, most of them ranged from high 6s to 7s. So we were generally very good in team building, understanding other medical disciplines, critical thinking, working under pressure, medical knowledge, and time management. So generally really positive results all across the board.
Did you have a good time working in this then?
I had a great time. I learned a lot. It was really good fun and really good for my CV as well, because with all these projects I got to present at national conferences and win prizes as well.
Oh, that's so cool. So did you mention that you presented at a national conference?
I did indeed. So this National Medical Research Conference, the VR project got presented at that, and it won the Best Oral Presentation Award.
Oh wow! So for people that are like new to this, would you recommend students getting involved in medical research?
I'd highly recommend getting involved with it, yeah. Not only would you learn lots of skills, but it can be really enjoyable. I've learned loads of new things, and getting to meet a lot of older years who have taught me loads of things as well. So really enjoyable, learn a lot, would highly recommend.
So if any student wants to get involved in touch with you and they want to find out more about this or ask you questions, would that be okay with you?
I'd be more than happy to help. Yeah, my student email is jss44.
Okay, thank you. So thank you so much for coming and talking with us today.
Thank you for having me, it's been a pleasure.
Hello, I'm James and I'm just starting my 3rd year of medicine here at Leicester. I'm part of the LUMRES committee and my role there is one of the 2 SPARKS coordinators. So what we do there is we just get like different academics to come in throughout the year and present their research to us medical students. Obviously with COVID it might be a while before we get someone in person again, but hopefully there'll be like stuff online throughout the year.
Hello, I'm Elena and I'm a 4th year medical student.
Hi, I'm Jade. I'm a 4th year medical student at the University of Leicester.
So my name's Ayushi Ramji and I finished my 3rd year of medicine. In my 4th year I was doing my intercalated masters. I was intercalating in medical research, so what I was trying to figure out was how to improve vaccination uptake and awareness for both MMR and men-ACWI. And also I was seeing if face masks could be used to detect meningitis.
My more noble achievements was I became a very avid runner. Was never a big fan of running before, but during the lockdown period I got very competitive about it. I went and bought myself a Fitbit, was obsessively looking at my Strava, and I also spent time studying. As you'll see when you start, there are some sort of questions on Blackboard, like revision style SBAs, so like me and some of my friends sort of helped write those, so that was one way of passing the time, and hopefully people will benefit from them in the future. Maybe sort of less noble stuff is got up on sleep. There's definitely a lot more time to take lie-ins. I probably got 8 hours a day most days of the week for the first time in maybe since childhood, which is very, very nice. And I got reacquainted with my PlayStation.
Today I'm going to be telling you about my YouTube channel, Medflix. Medflix was created in January 2020 when I realised that there was a lack of free resources online explaining and simplifying the topics that I was learning at a level for medical students to pass their exams and using the latest UK NICE guidelines. I realised that if I was having this problem, I couldn't be the only one. I decided to make short but clear videos that contained all the relevant details of topics for our exams, while making it interactive and easy to follow. Medflix was designed for medical students like myself, but since its creation, it's received positive feedback from nursing, midwifery, physiotherapy, and PA students, as well as patients. In fact, I now have over 300 subscribers in just 4 months. I release new videos every week. Using videos for the delivery of learning material has been especially useful during the global pandemic to allow students whose studies have been temporarily suspended to continue expanding their knowledge from the safety of their own homes. My hope for Medflix is that it can continue to help other students across the UK and across the world to realise that medicine doesn't need to be overcomplicated or scary to learn. I also hope to eventually cover all the most common specialties and continue switching up the way content is delivered to help students with different learning styles.
I was gardening, I was cooking a lot more, plus also I was relaxing a bit more because I think it's not just what we got up to. I think it was nice to have a break from our busy lifestyle. But in terms of working, I worked at the pharmacy for around a month, and then I started volunteering at Glenfield Hospital in ICU as a clinical assistant. I was just doing general nursing roles like manual handling, prescribing medication, doing patient checks, etc. Just things like that, taking the handover and stuff.
As a medical student, when you see an email asking you to come out and help, it's sort of your first instinct just to say yes. You know, we're all in here to sort of like, that's what we want to do. We want to be in the hospital, we want to be helping people out as best as we can. And also, you know, I was very lucky that I'm not sort of in a vulnerable shielding group. I wasn't living with anybody that was like elderly or also in a vulnerable group, so I was able to go in, and I think rather than sitting at home every day and just watching everything that was going on with great sadness, I was sort of able to get out and do my bit, which I was very lucky to be able to do.
My dissertation, my research had stopped, so I did, and I knew that I had some time on my hands, a period of time. Secondly, I was thinking, okay, let me help out because it's better if I could do that role, someone who's got clinical experience, and I had finished my 3rd year, compared to someone in 2nd year or 1st year, or someone in the community who may not have that experience. Thirdly, my dad was put on furlough, and so was my mum. So as like a basic income, I didn't know what was going to happen. I needed some money in case of my rent and stuff that I had to pay. Those are the main reasons, but also just to help out in the community as well.
My job was actually involved in research. So I think my official job title was Clinical Assistant Researcher. In reality, the job was a little bit mundane, but it was important work. So we were just getting all the patient notes. So anyone that came in to UHL that had a COVID positive swab, we would like go through all the notes that was made throughout their admission and put it into like the central UHL COVID database. So all that information could be used like to sort of see what patients get like the worst outcomes, or like what makes you more vulnerable to COVID, and you know what they're going to do in the future. Thankfully, because we were part of the team that put it in, we get to follow that through. We got to be part of some of the journal club meetings. I think just to be part of a research team, even though we were at the bottom, was still a very like interesting experience, and it was nice to know that my work was going towards something really important.
Yes, I have participated in this research project. It's trying to understand medical students' experience of working at the hospital alongside as having teaching from the university, and to see if the online learning from the university was beneficial for them, their experiences of that, and how their experiences were of actually working in the hospital as compared to placement, and to see if they can implement some of these things maybe in the course or
You will be the first freshers to ever start a course during a pandemic, so I don't know if I'm the best person to give any advice, but how I coped was, instead of trying to think about everything that I couldn't do because of all the sort of new normal, but try to think of the things that I gained. And I can tell you from experience, going in for an 8:30 lecture on a Wednesday when it's cold and wet is not very nice. You'll see if you ever do get into the GDC lecture theatre, but the downstairs rows are freezing and the upstairs rows are boiling. So you will be the first generation that can sit at home, watch your lecture in your bed with unlimited tea. Think of the luxuries that this new normal can give, the opportunities that are available, maybe more research opportunities if that's what you're interested in. I know there's more money than ever floating around, so if you're that sort of area you want to get involved in, I'm sure the teams at UHL would be really happy to hear from any medical students.
Try to stay positive. It's easier said than done, obviously. I know there is days that will be harder than others, but don't forget that there is always light at the end of the tunnel. And my little practical tips on how to stay positive would be to set yourself on small, achievable goals. Don't be too broad with it, but say something very specific so that every time you achieve it, you can increase it. Have not only a to-do list, this is something a friend of mine recommended, but also I have done lists where you not only write all the goals you have, but you keep track of everything you've done, because there is days you might feel not as productive in terms of work you have, but there is things that need to be done anyway, such as groceries, cleaning your place, tidying up, making all these administrative things you have to do. And just by writing them down, it makes you realize how much you've actually achieved, and that helps keeping the spirits up, I think. Don't forget to reach out if you need. This is a time where a lot of people are there available. Obviously, sometimes people might be a bit shy, or when you're on your own in lockdown, you don't want to disturb anyone's bubble or anything like that. Just reach out. We're all going through the same in a different way, coping in our own little different, unique ways. But speaking is very important if you need to. That's it.
I would say just make sure you're safe and reassure your family members, because I know some of you may be living with people who may be vulnerable, you may be vulnerable yourself. But just make sure you're safe, don't put too much pressure on yourself, enjoy yourself. Because in your first year, that is when you can join societies, that's when you should have fun. Medicine isn't life. You work to live, you don't want to live to work.
Hi, my name is Syed Maqbool. I'm a fourth year medical student, and I just want to talk to you about getting involved in research. I remember starting out in freshers, you're like this really motivated, and I remember thinking, okay, you know what, I want to get involved in research. I want to find things, I want to discover new things. However, I had no idea where to start. Now, research is a vital part of medicine, but how do you get involved in research as such? How do you tackle this problem which a lot of us face, where we have this passion, but we have no idea where to start? So what do you do? So first off, you want to figure out what you want to do research in. You're not going to enjoy any research in something which you are not interested in. It's just going to feel laborious, and you're going to be so bored the entire time. So you figured out what you want to do research in. How do you find the research project? There are multiple avenues you can go down. Now, in terms of Leicester University specifically, there's the Leicester University Medical Research Society. They have an initiative called LINK. Now, what LINK does, every single year, it's a group of students that find research projects with which other medical students can get involved in. What LINK will do, they'll send an email once a year to your entire year saying, okay, so these are the research projects we've found which you can get involved in. There'll be details about the research project. So, for example, what you could potentially get out of it, could you get a publication out of it, what is it looking into? However, let's say you don't like any of the research projects. So I was interested in research, for example, in neonatal. So I contacted the neonatal department in the Leicester Royal Infirmary. So they were actually happy with it. They wanted me to get involved with this national research project, which was organised by Oxford University. There are also national audits or research projects which medical students can get involved in. So to summarise, you have the LINK project in Leicester University. You can contact the wards or departments, and you can also get involved in national initiatives. So what roles can medical students do? Now, what role entirely depends on what the research project allows you to do. So in my research project in my first year, I actually got involved in data collection. So interviewing the patients, interviewing the registrar GPs, and also doing a focus group. There's also other roles, for example, data analysis. Getting involved in data analysis is actually very useful in the long run, because let's say you want to have an academic aspect when you graduate from medicine, you want to be a doctor, but at the same time you want to get involved in research. Learning about data analysis will help a lot with that. Ultimately, what tips can I give you in getting involved in research? So one huge tip which I want to in particularly emphasize to you guys is that if you do not have the time, if you feel like you do not have enough time to continue with your commitment, then don't hesitate to back out. You're a medical student, this is voluntary work. If you do not have the time, just email them, they'll understand. Rather than doing the job below the best of your ability and then letting them know, tell them beforehand, tell them that, yo, I have this issue, or I'm not able to commit as much time, is that alright? They'll be more than happy to accommodate. Other tips which I will give, in terms of research, yes, get involved in research projects which you are interested in, but also look at the research projects which you can develop your skill set in. That is the biggest mindset you can have as a medical student. Don't just get involved in things which you're interested in, get involved in things which also develop your skill set. If you're uncomfortable in, let's say, public speaking, get involved in teaching. If you're uncomfortable in talking to patients, get involved in an audit or research project which makes you talk to patients. Developing these skills will be vital for you to continue and develop as the best doctor you can be. And thank you very much, and thank you for listening to me.